BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this episode, we'll be harvesting raspberries in Nottinghamshire. And has the government's food strategy been watered down? With more on that coming up later. First, though, most rural councils have got no targets for building the social housing that many people on the lowest incomes rely on. And the government says they don't need to set any. That's according to a new study from the University of the West of England. Researchers have been looking into the provision of affordable housing across England's 84 rural local authorities. And they found there isn't enough of it. And they also say plans for new social housing aren't up to the job. The report was commissioned by the CPRE, the countryside charity. Professor Danielle Sinnott is one of the authors.
The three different things that we found was that one, there's been a kind of undersupply of housing overall. So all housing has been undersupplied over the last 25 years in many parts of rural England. And then as a consequence, that then means that there's been this really huge undersupply in affordable housing, particularly social housing. So even places that have quite good policies for affordable housing overall, when that is broken down into social rent, i.e. kind of council houses, that provision is much lower than what the aspirations were, essentially.
And you found that only 20% of local authorities have planning targets for new social housing.
Yeah, for specifically social housing. So lots of local authorities just have an overall affordable housing target. But what they don't do is break that down by the different types of affordable housing that you can get. So, within that affordable housing target, there might be inclusion of social rent, affordable home ownership, first homes, etc. But because they don't break that down specifically, it all gets lumped in together.
Why does that matter?
Well, it matters because it's quite difficult to deliver social rents, social rented properties. So if you don't have specific targets, then the more profitable types or the least unprofitable types of affordable housing end up being prioritised. And the social rent is what is really, really required for people in the most need.
We've often reported on this programme that for small villages, particularly in tourist hotspots, affordable housing is one of the biggest problems that communities there face. Yet the government's new social and affordable housing programme, which was launched earlier this month, has actually scrapped targets for building affordable housing in rural areas. What impact is that going to have?
I mean, it's obviously hard to predict the exact impact, but, I would expect, most developers don't really want to deliver affordable housing. So the only reason they do it is because there are targets. So if you scrap the targets, affordable homes are very unlikely to be delivered.
I mean, the government has said that not having those targets will lead to greater flexibility and that they're perhaps looking for ambitious projects that could provide solutions. Do you think that's likely to happen?
I think it's quite naive, to be honest. I mean, the work that we've done has found that housing in rural areas is being chronically undersupplied anyway. And we're not, even places with relatively modest affordable housing targets are not able to deliver them. So how would, I'm a bit bemused by the logic there, to be honest, of how getting rid of those targets would help.
But in the social and affordable homes programme that the government launched a bit earlier this month, it has said that its ambition is to deliver around 300,000 social and affordable homes. But it's putting £39 billion into it. And they say that at least 60% of those will be for social rent. I mean, some of those houses will be built in rural areas, you would imagine?
I would imagine that, maybe some of them will be, that the vast majority will probably be built in more urban locations without those fine-grained policies in the more rural areas. That 300,000 is not going to tackle this massive undersupply that there's been for, several decades now. That number needs to be larger than that. I understand that that's difficult, and this is a really good start. But we can't stop with that 300,000.
That's Professor Danielle Sinnott. Now, the soft fruit harvest is in full swing, and the recent sweltering weather has proved something of a challenge for the thousands of seasonal workers labouring under polytunnels to bring in a crop which has ripened early this year. We're exploring different aspects of the UK's soft fruit sector all through this week. The Tasker Partnership produces around 2,500 tonnes of strawberries and raspberries each year on their North Nottinghamshire farm. Stephen Tasker is one of their managing partners, and he's been showing our reporter Bob Walker around.
It's one of the oldest tractors on the farm, which has been brought out of retirement while in the peak of our season.
And he's doing what?
He's just bringing raspberries in and he's taking empty trays back out. It's only come out now for this week and next week, and then it goes back into retirement again. So we're now in one of our raspberry fields. They've been picking here since about 5 o'clock this morning just to try and keep out of the heat.
And I've come to you on probably the hottest day of the year. What impact has the weather had on the crop?
It's bringing the crop on incredibly at the moment, but also the season itself has been very hot, and the light levels have been some of the highest we've had for many years. We don't start producing fruit till the middle of May on strawberries and June in raspberries. We were supplying strawberries middle of April this year, and the raspberries we were starting at sometime middle of May, so a lot earlier than normal.
Is everything grown under polytunnels?
I think in the UK, approaching 100% of all soft fruit now will be grown in polytunnels. It's a protection, it's insurance policy, it enables us to have high quality fruit, it gives us a great availability for the supermarkets. But if we didn't have the tunnels as well, we'd probably start the season a month later and we'd probably finish it at least a month earlier.
It extends the season?
So it's extending the season by at least 2 months. And we're asked now by the supermarkets to try and grow for much more of the year.
How would you describe this year's crop? What's it looking like?
Generally, an early year, we always say, is a good year. And yeah, at the moment it's giving us some, which we think we're going to have record-breaking yields this year. If we go back to last year was a late year. So when the staff arrived last year, we didn't have that much work for them. This year, as soon as they arrive, they're hitting the ground running. The staff weren't programmed to come until May. We have to make that decision in January, February time. So all of a sudden, to the weather change, we can't change the flights and the tickets for some of the workers coming over.
And where are you getting your staff from?
Most of our staff will be from Romania, Bulgaria, Poland and the Stan countries. Labour's always going to be the biggest challenge to our industry. Without the access to workers, we don't have an industry. And then we generally will be relying on fruit from overseas.
Well, I think you said you've got over 300 people working here at the moment. It seems that you're managing to source those workers. It doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, the government have got the source scheme, which is working very well. That's fine, but the government are talking about reducing the access and the numbers of visas that we have to the scheme or to the industry. But yeah, it's just going to be the biggest challenge we have.
I've noticed as we're walking along, you keep picking them and tasting. Are you quality controlling as we go along?
Look, I'll eat berries all day long and I don't care what colour they are, that's just me.
It's not like working in a sweet shop then when you finally get fed up of sweets.
Yeah, but it's the healthy products, it's okay.
Stephen Tasker and Bob Walker in Nottinghamshire. Now, you might just have missed this because it wasn't launched with a huge fanfare, but the government has published its food strategy for England. It aims to create what it calls a good food cycle, a framework to make food production more sustainable, radically overhaul our relationship with food and prepare farmers and food producers for future challenges. The National Farmers Union has welcomed the document, though it says it needs to be backed up by joined up and pragmatic policy measures. But there are concerns that the strategy has been watered down and that a food white paper expected in the spring has been dropped. Ian Quinn from the Grocer magazine has been following this story.
We've been waiting for several months now to see what Labour would do with this. They announced back in December that they were going to do a new food policy. This follows the policy that Henry Dimbleby did for the previous government back in 21. Finally, this week, we got the list of 10 policy objectives that were published this week.
And how are these new plans, the new objectives in this new government food strategy different to what had gone before then? I mean, is there anything radically different?
Not really, no. I mean, it's very much the sort of things that you would have expected in policies that are aimed at tackling the obesity crisis. With it being a Labour government, as we would have expected, there's a heavy emphasis on affordability of food and making healthy food more available to families. There's also mention of improving supply chain resilience and helping create jobs and increase skills in the sector.
I mean, we heard that people thought it was a bit thin on detail. What's the reaction been?
That has been the reaction generally, that it's very scant on the details. In some ways, that was to be expected, but bearing in mind the advisory group that was set up to oversee this was only launched in March. I mean, it would have been surprising if they'd have been too far down the road with firm policies. However, this is perhaps even more top level than people were hoping. There isn't really anything in there by way of firm policies, and some of the policies that perhaps we might have expected to see in this strategy Defra has found itself somewhat gazumped by the Department of Health, which announced plans on the obesity side earlier this month.
Yeah, I mean, there had been plans for a food white paper next year, but those seem to have disappeared. What can you tell us about that?
Well, yes, that's, very interesting. We've seen a draft of this document, which was very different and included plans for a food white paper, which was due to have come out next year. Obviously, a white paper suggests that the government is then committing to come up with policies and legislation to back up its proposals. In the final document this week, there is no mention at all of a white paper. It's disappeared, and sources we've been speaking to suggest that has happened as a direct result of intervention from Number 10.
Really? Why is Number 10 intervening?
It's a good question. The speculation is that they're loathed to bring in regulation because of the risks, both in terms of it potentially impacting on food prices and could be strongly resisted by the food industry. But also, it's not just that, it's also any big policy that the food strategy comes up with that requires substantial government investment, obviously is something that the Treasury would have to bankroll. Now, everyone knows the situation that the Chancellor's in at the moment, so it does appear that this perhaps has fallen victim to that situation.
I mean, the Defra Minister, Daniel Zeichner, says that these are ambitious plans to change our relationship with food and what we eat. And, I mean, it does involve different government departments like health and employment all working together. It's a hugely complex area. Do you think they're to be applauded for trying to look at this on a much deeper level?
Yeah, I think that there's been quite a lot of praise on him. He seems to have taken a very keen interest in this, and he does seem to understand the nature of the challenge. It's like herding cats, obviously, to get cross-government support, especially for such objectives that they're setting out here. But it doesn't look at this stage anyway that this is to do with Defra incompetence. It looks more like it's been difficult to get political buy-in. It sounds like Defra wanted to go further.
That's Ian Quinn from The Grocer. Well, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs told the magazine this government is committed to developing a food strategy where everyone stands to benefit from a nutritious, sustainable and resilient food system. The Good Food Cycle represents a major milestone in developing a food system that's fit for the future. No decisions have been made on the format of any future publications. And that's it from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Beatrice Fenton, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.